Hello, everyone. You are listening to She Leads with Carly, and in this show, we talk to the absolute best, brightest, and yes, badass leaders. I'm your host, Carly Malatskey. Hello, everyone. I am super excited to welcome our guest today, Camilla Matias. Camilla is the Chief Operating Officer at Brex, a financial technology company that provides a range of financial services tailored to startups and other businesses. Camilla started at Brex as a head and VP of finance before transitioning into the operations side as the SVP of global operations before becoming the COO. Prior to Brex, Camilla worked at the Kraft Heinz Company, one of the largest food and beverage companies in the world, starting as a finance analyst to becoming the director of finance in just under 3 years. Camilla earned her bachelor's degree in aeronautics and mechanical engineering from ITA, one of the most respected and top universities based in Brazil, specializing in aerospace science and engineering. She was one of only 6 women in her graduating class of 120 people. I'm excited to get into that. Camilla, it is so great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. I'm overly excited to be here.
Of course. The feeling is mutual. So, Camilla, I already know this, but you are from Brazil. You grew up in Brazil. Tell me a little bit what your childhood looked like, and yeah, let's go from there.
Okay, let me start with a very fun fact, which I think this one you don't know. I am actually the youngest of 6 kids. So yes, so growing up being the youngest, you kind of have to do everything quicker and faster because you want to be in the mix with your siblings, right? So it was always since the beginning, okay, you have to be an overachiever for your age to be in the mix with the rest of the family.
Yeah. And so did you grow up, I'm guessing it was very competitive between you guys. Was it a big age gap or pretty close in age?
Yeah, actually, there was a big gap. Between me and my sister, who is the second youngest, it's almost 4 years. So between me and the oldest, it's like 12 years. So it was a huge gap.
And so, Camilla, I mentioned in the intro, you went to ITA. I can say the whole name, but I probably shouldn't because I don't have the best accent. But you went to ITA, one of the most respected top universities in Brazil, in aerospace, science, and engineering. Given that, I have to assume that you loved school growing up and that you were very academic. Is that true? Was that something that you sought to achieve yourself, or did it kind of come from pressure from your parents?
Let's say that I loved math. I very much loved math. Even I think, oh my gosh, I think since very early on I started being part of math competitions. Some national in Brazil, some international. I also ended up very much in physics too, so it was a mix of both. So I would say that I was a nerd. I have a lot of friends that joke that I didn't learn how to bike. I didn't know how to bike until I was 20. And I learned in college. So I think this explains a lot about maybe being a nerd growing up.
I love it. I love it. So going around your teenage years, you're approaching, where do you want to go to college? Was it a very obvious decision to go to ITA? How did you approach that? And were you thinking of, this is what I want to do in my career, stay in math, stay in science and engineering?
No, that's a great question. So ITA, let's put it that way. So ITA is also a military school. It's an engineering and military school. So just by being a woman, it was kind of unexpected that I would want to go to this type of school. There are very, very few women every single year. And in Brazil, which is very different in America, you actually go to universities close to your hometown. So you normally live with your parents throughout your whole college experience. ITA and a few other schools, one other school, you actually move out of your state, out of your hometown, and you actually live in the campus. So even though this is so obvious in the United States, that's not the experience that we have back in Brazil. So it was different for all those reasons, right? You had to move away at a young age. It was a military school, which was not very common for women. And the reason why I decided to go to ITA, which is I second guessed myself in this decision in the past, it was because it was the most challenging in school. I was for the challenge, okay, this is very, very hard to get in. and I decided to try that. I wasn't very clear if I wanted to be like an engineer myself. I I started coding when I was 12, so I liked it. I loved math, but honestly, maybe economics, maybe like another major would be like more like my style and like what I do today. But yes, the challenge pushed me through that journey.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like more than anything, you were motivated by the challenge, by the statistics that it's hard to get in, and you were up to that challenge. And so, did any of your older siblings go to that school, or were you
No,
actually quite different than the rest?
no,
Wow,
very much
okay.
different than the rest. I think my mom actually would have preferred that I went to med school. So in Brazil, there is like this thing that if you go to med school, you made in life, you're very smart. So everyone expected me to go to med school. My sister, the closest to me, she's a doctor. So I mean, I'm sure that my
Okay.
mom, like throughout my college, which was very very hard to get in, she would still ask me like, "You sure that you don't want to be a doctor?" Clearly not, but
Wow.
huge respect, but love what I do today.
So, tell me a little bit about your experience going to ITA, being one woman out of six out of a whole class of 120. Was there a moment where you were like, what the hell am I doing? Like, this is too hard and too hard to be in. And how did you navigate that time?
Yeah, and that's funny because when you're young, you actually don't realize that. So I mean, because I started competing like in those, I mean, math competitions from a very, very young age, I was always like around like the men. Even though I love theater, I love dancing, I loved a lot of like all the activities. From an academic perspective, I was always like one of the very few women or girls between my friends, right? So when I went to college, it was more like of like the normal. So I didn't realize until you start having like the college parties until you realize that there is very, very, I mean, there is no way to hide. I think the first thing that, I mean, you you always gonna be an outlier for the good and for the bad. So there is always a higher expectation because you are like in that mix. Or there is always people feeling that, oh, you are there just because like you're like a woman. So like maybe you don't even deserve to be
Yeah.
there, but we need like to just like hit the maximum. So like yes, that's why she's here. Or even because sometimes it's funny, but throughout college, one thing that I heard a lot was, oh, yeah, she got that because she's a woman. And I was like, that's so when this started becoming, I think I started realizing that throughout beginning of college and mid college. And then I started in Brazil, you can start working very early on. So I
Okay.
started working in banking in the beginning of like my college experience, which is different than like what we do here. But this was also adding to the mix, right? Like, oh, she got the job because like she's a woman, like oh, and I was like, or she is the president of like this club because she's a woman. So I heard this like multiple times, and it was always funny to like, okay, how do I go around that? How do I prove that I deserve to be here? But yes, that was definitely a
Yeah.
few things that I heard multiple times.
So how did you react to that? Because that is something at the end of the day, I talk about this a lot on this podcast, but it happens still today, right? Is that you think you're there just because you're a woman versus the mindset that, I am an outlier and so I do stand out, but that could be a positive. But take me back to your early 20s, right? Where people are saying that. Was that something that fueled you in a positive way, or did it almost kind of put you down a bit and dim you?
A mix of both. And
Okay.
I think like on the positive side, it was like, oh, I'm noticing something here. So like more and more like I think I like the challenge as I said in the beginning. So it was more like a challenging situation to be. So I felt that I need to prove that I deserve being here. But it does sometimes put you down and like maybe it's just like this thing like the imposter syndrome like that we always talk about. Do I
Totally.
actually deserve to be here? Did I get this because I'm really a woman? Like I'm actually don't deserve like so like what I but this actually helps you because sometimes you try to prove so much that you deserve to be like in that position in that room or like whatever it is that at least for me was I kind of like felt that I had to be 10x better than like my peers to deserve being like in those rooms which maybe push me to move quicker. one thing that I did at school, uh, and I didn't fully understand at the time, I felt that we needed to talk more about that. And we needed to
Okay.
create like, okay, let's create like a women group, like to talk about those science, because I wanted to learn. It was not as enough like to give back, but at the time I was like, okay, who are the other women in those positions? So I created like this group with like this um, foundation that I got a scholarship from, like to discuss like the women challenge. That was kind of like women in leadership position. I was one of the co-leads, which was funny because I was in college. The other person was already like a successful banker, but whatever. I thought was very normal at the
Yeah.
time. But my friends in college didn't realize that. So they didn't feel that they were outliers. It took them like one, two, three
Wow.
years of actually starting in like in the job markets, getting their first job to actually feel the pressure. So it was funny because I was like complaining about something. Oh, do you notice this? And everyone was like, no. And I was like, okay,
And
I may be different.
it's interesting though. It's interesting though because maybe like there's also positives in not noticing. You know, like in
No.
a way it's just saying, you know what, I'm one of the same and we're all proving ourselves and it's challenging for everyone. But I'm sure at some point in everyone's experience, whether it's in college, whether it's in professional, in finance, you get a little bit of awakening. So having that community to lean on is probably so important because of that.
Yes, I wouldn't be here where I am without having the community. I think like listening to those stories helped me a lot. I still mentor students from like the same from the same school, right? Like I think this is a very important thing that I have to do, and I always try to mentor women, like girls, like in college. Like I think for me this is important. But yes, I think sometimes not knowing would have been better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as I said, you studied aeronautics and mechanical engineering. So there's a disconnect here because you ultimately went into finance, private equity, and then you continued in finance and tech. When did that shift happen and how were you thinking about your career long term? What were you optimizing for almost?
Yes, no, great question. I think so. I was like living in another city, right? I think first of all, uh, I didn't grow up like in a very well family, so like moving to another city, there was always something. Hey, you have to work during college to pay your bills, to pay like whatever, like,
Yeah.
and so to pay rent, to pay everything, to pay the day to day. So I think that's this for me, like having like this in the financial independence was super important. And then I heard multiple times that bankers and finance folks like Wall Street, like the Faria Lima in Brazil, they made more money. So like my thought was like, oh, that's what I need. So I need to go to finance, but I didn't have like any background in finance. So I had to study accounting, everything outside, get like internships in those areas with like my internships for like engineering school to kind of like get a job. So it was like a little bit mix
Yeah.
match like between the two journeys. But honestly, that was the reason why I went to finance. It was, oh, I may have like more growth opportunities in the short term. And maybe my life would have been very different if I had continued in the engineering trajectory.
And I know you have opinions on this. I know we talked about this before, but looking back now, in many, many cases, right, that is so fair and normal saying financial security, financial independence, like you sometimes need it. But that can often conflict with true passion, right? And the passion doesn't align with the job security and what and if you will. So I'd love to get your thoughts. How do you think about that, especially for young early professionals navigating in their career to balance the two and how to go about it?
Excellent question. So again, I think because I had like those groups like that, I could also like learn from like more experienced women, or like even like had scholarships that helped me to be in contact with like maybe successful people during college. I heard multiple times that learning was a huge investment. So like your first job, like your first experience should be about learning. So for me, even though the financial independence was very important, the learning piece of it was also something that I had very deep on me. That I was like, hey, it doesn't matter. It's not only about speed, but it's about like what I'm learning too. So I always relied on like whatever I need to do both. So like going to private equity in the beginning of my career was like, oh, I think it's going to be a very good learning experience that I'm going to learn about companies. Uh, but I will also like give me like the financial independence that I want to have like early on in my career.
Right.
One thing that for me was very important, the learning was always tied to people that I admired and like that I wanted to work with, because in my head was like, oh, I need to learn from the good behaviors, right? It's like this is the people that I want to be in the future. So even though the financial independence again was important, I think for me it was like to who I'm gonna work for, because I felt okay,
Yeah.
this person will have my back. So like since the beginning, I didn't care as much about what I would be doing. If I was going to be doing for the right team, for the right person, I would be okay.
Got it. I love that. And did you ever, for those people that you found, did you ever, was it more aspirational or did you reach out to them, talk to them and learn? Was there like that self, acting upon it? How did you go about it?
Yes, I think it was a mix of both.
Okay.
But I definitely went and like tried to talk with like multiple folks. Uh, I never really, people talk a lot about like networking. I, for me, like networking in the beginning of my career, it was not about networking to learn people to be in the mix. For me, it was a genuine interest on learning. I still find hard for me to network just for the aspect of like networking and getting to know more people. I think I'm a extrovert but an introvert person in some ways too. Uh, so what for me was important was like I really like I emailed very cold calls people and ask, hey, can I learn more about like what you do? Like, and then I would come with like a
Yeah.
ton of questions. It would be maybe a little bit silly, but it was so genuine that people would feel okay sharing it with me. Like she's, and one thing that I say is that the best thing about being young is you can do any dumb thing, like you can ask any dumb question, but you're gonna be forgiven because you're way too young and you were trying and you were learning. I really took advantage of that. For me, it was very like, I mean, I can ask like whatever because like people will, if you forgive that and they will forget, so it's fine. I have like that attitude.
So I love it. So, okay, before we go on to Kraft Heinz, and I'm excited to get into that, but I love how you describe that experience of cold emailing. And I think you're right. First of all, networking has also this icky connotation, right? It's ingenuine. Whereas if it comes from a place of authenticity and like genuine interest, there's something meaningful there. But naturally, when you think of your life, when you think of who you are, were you always, it seems like you weren't scared of rejection. Like you were always up to just embracing the challenge, if you will. Is that true? And did it come through even in career?
No, I'm actually very scared about rejection, but I think it's because I'm so scared that I have like a, plan B, plan C. Uh, I don't think
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
accept a no easily. It's just, and I'm very pessimistic, which is funny. And like people say, I try to say, no, I'm an optimistic person, but it's not. I'm a very pessimistic. But for me, it's like, no, the no is not never the final answer. So I keep trying I get to like what I need. So I'll keep like, there was
Yeah.
this thing. I was president of this club, and there was like this coach that had won many Olympics medal to Brazil, and I wanted this guy to go and speak to my students in this small NGO. And this guy has written books like very famous. Uh, and then I think I called him like maybe like 10 times to a point that he replied once, "You are obsessed." Like I'm coming because I'm afraid that you're gonna find my address and come here. So it's just
That's
like it
amazing.
never the no like didn't cross my mind at a young age.
I love that story and I understand that. I've implemented the same with this podcast, trust me. So that's
Very
amazing.
true.
And oh, so Camila, tell me now, you ended up moving to America and going to work at Kraft Heinz first as an analyst. And I want to know, how was that experience? Was that the first time living in another place other than Brazil? Like what was that transition like? Was it challenging? All of it.
Yeah, so again, it goes back to who I was going to work with. So economy in Brazil wasn't great. I was working private equity, so it was very beginning of my career. I thought, oh, we're not gonna do like a lot of like deals. You'd have to go more to the portfolio company. And by the way, this is like what's happened. And Heinz had just bought Kraft, and the CFO from Kraft Heinz had gone to my university, which is very rare. He had done his MBA in
Wow.
Harvard, and like just like living in the US for like a while. So then he reached out, like, because we worked like in the same like projects during college. He was, of course, way more tenured than me, and he was like, oh, I'm thinking about bringing like smart analysts to start that. And then didn't even like, he was so, I mean, he was so impressive in his career. Like for me, it was like, oh, I need to learn from this person. So it never crossed my mind like, okay, I gotta go. I will go. I will learn from him. I'll be there like for like a year and a half. Then I come back to Brazil, and I bring all this like international experience early on in my career. Then I come back to private equity, and that's great. So like that was my thought at the time. Like, I'm gonna learn from someone that is very good. It's a huge merger. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I didn't really understand how cold Chicago was, especially from someone coming from Brazil and my hometown, which is hot, Caribbean, hot all over the year.
Yeah.
So yes, that's how I decided.
And ultimately, how was that transition into the States, right? Because that changed your decision to go back into private equity. Obviously that didn't happen. So what was that like for you, your experience at Kraft Heinz?
Yes, I think there was, and this is an advice that I normally give people early in their careers. In my head, I had to be like very good with like the models, like the Excels, because like for me, like the most successful people in private equity, they were like always very good like modeling companies, right? And things that I would hear on my day to day is like, Camila, you're very good with like people. You get very good like doing like a diligence call, like understanding all the details. And I always took like that's almost as offensive, like, what? I'm not as good with the numbers, like this is insane. I'm an engineer, like how really forcing myself to try to do something that maybe wasn't my main skill. And when I went to Kraft Heinz, the same thing, right? I was like, oh, I want to do like all the finance things, but everyone was always pulling me like into how you do this cross-functionally, how you get like this to like an alignment, or like how you think about the strategic budget. And for me, like this was kind of like, I'm not a people person, I'm a numbers person. Why people are asking me to do like those more management tasks? I'm not good at it. I have to be good at the numbers because I'm a math nerd, right? So when I went to Kraft Heinz, this was a very interesting an interesting place to be, because I was working for a much larger company. To get things done, you actually need to have this major, especially like I grew very quick at Kraft Heinz, and I'm very thankful for all the opportunities that I had there. But this is not normal, not like in a big corporation, not in a Fortune 500, and maybe normal in tech companies, which is like more like what I do today, but clearly not. So I think like this, plus like my genuine interest in like, I'm here to learn. I just came from Brazil. I'm studying. I think people are trying to help this lost person in a sense, and like that's how I kind of like found my way. But that said, learning a new language, a new work environment, like was all too much. Fun fact: in Brazil, we hug people when you first meet the person, even in a work environment. Like, so my first day at Kraft,
it's part of the culture.
It's part of the culture. So my first day at Kraft Heinz, I hugged. I was like, "Oh, nice meeting you." My manager, he is the CFO of like a company today. We still joke about that. How he was like, "Who's this person?"
Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah, because it was probably a bit. You were hugging everyone. They were all like, "Wow, this is so
I learned
warm,
quickly.
but different."
Yes, I learned very quickly. Day two, I knew that the hugging wasn't a good thing.
So, Camila, I have to know, like you said, big corporation, but you grew so fast and you ultimately became the director of finance in such a short period. And yes, you attribute it to, wanting to learn and having this passion, but almost what ultimately do you think enabled you? Did you have to do self advocacy for yourself? Was it something where, was it how did you do it? What was something tangible that allowed you to grow in that speed?
I think a mix of both. This is not something that I would be proud to say, but similar like to being like the woman in the group, like I felt because I had a tech accent, which I still have, I had to be 10x better to be in the same position, or
Wow.
maybe work way more hours to be allowed to be in the same place. And in my head, again, let's go back to my point. I thought it would be 18 months experience, right? Uh, so it was okay to be working many, many more hours because I would go back to my country and my hometown after, right? So I
Okay.
didn't really. So I did put a lot of hours. I did put a lot of like nights, uh, and I really felt pressure. Like I need to be much better to even deserve being here. So this was definitely
Okay.
something that pushed on the speaking for yourself. Yes, uh, there were a few times that I was first put into the position before being actually promoted to the position, uh, and I had to complain. So there was this manager that I had for like a while, one of my bosses, he said, "You're like one of like the most annoying persons advocating for a promotion, but that's why you are where you are." But I
Wow.
just felt that I like again like sometimes like the no didn't bother me as much. So I was like, why not?
You were like, yeah, damn right.
Yes, I'm leaving
Did
in
you
18
did you
months,
feel
right?
that? That's incredible. And because I think a lot of people can take that one of two ways, right? One is just like, oh shit, like I have to quiet. I have to quiet down. Versus like, yeah, I'm going to continue running through walls. And it seems like you were the latter, but is that true? Or did you have moments of like, I don't fit in?
Oh, I had multiple moments that I don't fit in. Multiple. But I think like
Wow.
the pieces that I had, like I don't fit in, forced me to be much better. Because I didn't fit in, I had to deserve it. It was kind of like, what do I need to do to make people want me in, even if I don't fit in? So it's weird to say
Camila,
that.
if you could tell your younger self during this time, maybe something else, would you tell her something to do something differently or no?
Yes, I'll tell her to sleep more. Like, no, no. Jokes aside, I would say keep trying. Don't give up. Uh, I think
Like the work ethic is worth it.
yes, it's worth it. Choose who you want to be around you, the folks that you admire. I mean, I'm very, very grateful for everyone that's throughout my whole journey who gave me like the chance to prove myself. I'm very loyal to. Uh, but I think like I think continue to be loyal. It would be like an advice that I would give. I maybe would tell my younger self that you don't need to stress as much about a few things. I still feel that I didn't sleep as much like throughout end of college and
Yeah.
beginning of like my career.
And are you still, and we're going to get into Brex, but are you still in the mindset as well of, I need to have a plan A, B, and C? Or has that kind of subdued a bit and almost lived with more
No, I do.
spontaneity?
No, I do. I do. I think that the
I
plan A, B, and C, yes. And I think that's what helps me so much in operations today. Um, I think different
How
than
so?
yeah, it's different than finance. I think finance you kind of like need to get everything perfect. It's like a board meeting. It's an investor meeting. It's how you present like in the release call, right? If it's a public company, and then you have like the time you have like until the very very late hour to to get everything perfect, to get the deck perfect, to get the model perfect. In operations, you can't because you never had like the full information. You don't have the time to make the decision. You are normally getting way more people in a sense that people need to operate and you don't want to block everyone while you think like what is the very perfect best. So because of that, I feel that I have to make decisions much, much quicker. But then if like the decision is not exactly what I want, like how do I quick turnaround? So like that's when I need the plan B. Or like, okay, but if this doesn't work, like what is the plan C then? So and I think in the startups environment, like whenever you're growing very quick, this helps so much. Because you don't want to like just have like a plan and like go for it and like never give up. It's okay to change course. And I think that has
Yeah.
saved me multiple times.
It's so interesting, and I love how you drew the parallel between finance and operations. So, because it is starkly different, which makes me wonder, you go to Brex and you're first in finance, head of finance, VP of finance, but then you make the transition to SVP of global operations. What made you make that transition? How did that happen?
First, I think it was a mix the company needed. Uh, and second, it was also going back to the points that sometimes I wanted so much to be in finance because like that was a financial independence, etc., that I put it in my head when I was younger. But the reality is, it's funny because I went to like this very, very small and hard to get in engineering school. I started coding when I was like 12. People at Brex don't even know that I can code. Don't even know that. Yes, no. Camilla's a people person. She's yes, a motivational speaker.
Amazing.
And I'm like, this is very much who I didn't think I was until 5 years ago. The reason why I say that is like, so on the operational side, what I had to embrace was this other side of me that people were telling me that I had that I didn't know. That is like, how can I push folks to actually be the best of like themselves? How do I work around people? How do I get this cross-functional alignment? How do I bring clarity, like so we can work like towards something that will make the company better, that will grow folks' careers. So I think it was understanding and
But
accepting that.
do you think that parts of you changed to fit into this role? Was there a learning curve to it? Or do you think it was actually always in you? You just almost didn't have to show it because you were in finance. You didn't have to show that side.
I think more the second, more the latter. I think I did. I tried to hide, uh, but I love what I do today. I don't know. I don't know if I can really go back to finance, even though I love finance too. But I get so much joy from seeing my team, or like whenever like I get someone very young that is starting a career and they grow so much. This just makes my day. And like when they're like better, so I feel that I always need to hire people better than me. Like they are always, all my direct reports are much better than me. So I feel that this gives me like, okay, that's why I'm here. That's what I do because like, and then you now I feel that I need to be better because of like them. So then it's like this trust thing. Like so I'm loyal to them. And like okay, so the company needs to be better. So we all win together, but also. Because I grew so quick in my career, I'm kind of like I need to push everyone to grow as quick as they want in their careers too. So it's this mixed feeling.
So tell me about, as the chief operating officer at Brex, a widely successful company, very well known, how, tell me about your day to day. What does the COO do? What are the main parts?
It changes every day. That's the beauty of operations. I would say it's more like on a weekly basis. There are like a few metrics that are very important to me. So I'm still a numbers driven person. I'm still like I'm making sure that I meet with like my team very frequently. But the fun fact is like things change, and as I said, you need to make the decision. So I do have a bunch of like meetings on a daily basis, but a lot of like incidents come around, like if you're like in the tech world,
Right.
or like, oh, how you actually do you treat this customer, or how do you balance risk versus the customer. One thing that I do daily, and I know people think that I may be a little insane for doing that. I love being on the details. So there is the CSAT survey, which is the customer satisfaction, that you normally complete after you finish the support call. And I know that everyone hates like reaching out to support. So I think like if you do waste the time, like you give your time, let's put it that way, to write something, to give some information, is because you really want to say that. So I read all of them. I read everything that is the score can go from 1 to 5. So 4 and 5s I don't read because everything looks great, unless someone let me know, oh, someone did an amazing job. But I read all the 1s to 3s. Our scores is like 91+%, which is amazing. But I do also attribute that because I actually read, and I'm still trying to be very, very close to what the customers are saying, to like what are the real problems that our customers have. So this is very much part of my day to day.
And what do you feel to be a very successful and powerful, or almost just effective COO? What are almost the top 3 attributes that all CEOs should have that maybe they don't?
Yes, I don't know if I'm a very successful COO. I think I'm a very successful company, and I think I have like an amazing team. Like, so let me start with like that. So like the imposter syndrome is always there. So a few things that I think are important for me to do my job. I think one is this customer obsession. I didn't have like this when I worked at Kraft Heinz. Or when I was like initially in finance. I learned at Brex. I learned that for the company to be successful, you really need to understand and feel the customer pain, because we do sell for the finance teams in many situations. I think I also feel the pain of like our customers, so I can relate very well.
Yeah.
Second is adaptability. I'm a very, I mean, as I said, plan A, B, C, change routes. People ask me what I hate the most about Brex, and I normally say because we make very bold and large swings decisions. But I think that's also why we are successful, and being able to adapt throughout whatever journey we go. It's really important for my role. And last but not least, I think spending time with the team, finding the right folks that you're gonna work with, this is definitely very important.
And you mentioned imposter syndrome, right? And it's something that, it's talked about a lot. It has all these different underlying messages too. How do you deal with it, and almost advice for other young women as well, who are, whether it's in a C-suite role, whether it's, earlier in their career, what advice do you have for those who are going through that as well?
That's a tough one. I think trust yourself, and like have a community, like have folks around you that can support you, and like that you can go through things. I think this is really important. I would say try to, and maybe try to attach yourself like to goals and like to numbers, to like real impactful things. And like when you go back to, there are a few things that we did like in the last 6 months, then when, or like in the last 6 years, that I feel that, oh my gosh, we did that. Like, so that is, it's a fact, right? So try to hold yourself, not hold yourself accountable only for like an accountability for the future, but try to always remember the milestones and like say, hey, I did this. Like in many situations, I'm always like, oh, I finished a milestone and like, okay, what's the next? But what did we just do? Take the time to see, oh, wow, that's how much I grew like in this experience. Like I actually did that. I'm capable of doing that. And like going through that with like something that is very, very actionable, like real, give you like, okay, I can actually do more. I'm not an imposter here. I deserve to be here.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's so, so true. We find ourselves always just seeking the next thing without recognizing what you have accomplished. So just like, taking that time, and it could be a short amount of time, but still, I think that ultimately will also compound. So I love that you said that. And Camilla, when you look at your career to becoming COO, you went through your own path, right? And you started in finance, you started in engineering, finance, ultimately to operations. Do you think there's one model? Because a lot of people feel there's always one model in a career. And how do you think about that?
Absolutely not. There is no one model. If there was one model, that was not my model, and I wouldn't be here, right? Like, just think about all the changes that I made throughout my career. I think sometimes we create those models and like those steps that we need to have in our careers. Oh, I need to do this. Like, no, now I need to be in this position, this title, that quick. And like, this actually blocks us to being the best of like ourselves. So I think for me, I think that the main thing that unblocked my success for was like, I mean, I do a bunch of things wrong. I'm not good at a bunch of things. But there are very, very, very few things that I do very well. Very few. And that's why I was promoted. That's why I was given the challenge. That's why I was given the changes. So if I do invest the time on those very few things, and becoming the best at it, or like the amazing at it, and like always becoming like Camilla's differentiator, or like this is only Camilla can do, or Camilla can deal very well under pressure, or like if this is a problem, I give to Camilla. So like whatever it is, you need to find this for yourself. Normally, it's slightly different than what you think, but everyone around you know this about you, and just listen and accept. And it doesn't matter. It can be that you're extremely technical. It can be that you're great with like people. Whatever is your attributes that makes you special in the world, invest on this. That will make you grow much quicker.
And to discover that, did you ask other people? Because it seemed like people actually came to you and said, Camilla, you'd be amazing. You're amazing with people. You're so positive, even though you think you're pessimistic. How do you tune into that superpower that you may have?
Fun fact, it doesn't matter if you ask people. People normally tell you. I think the problem is like we are not open to listen. People told me multiple times, but then instead of like focusing on like the good that they were telling me, at least I was focusing on like the negative, and why I was not the best at something else that I thought was important, because that's what I wanted to be, because that was the role model that I had created to myself. So I think it's just like, there is no specific role model. We don't need to be like, oh, that person that was exceptional because of X, Y, Z. And so I think it's just, we don't listen. We clearly, and like it's unblocking ourselves to listen a little bit more. Like, what do people actually tell you that you're good at?
And I think you're so right. And beyond not listening, I think it's a mix of heightening the negative, right? And and listening to that and dwelling on that, and whether it's improving on it or not, but it's still not recognizing the strengths that others are sharing about you. Yes. It's so interesting. Okay, before we go into more fun questions, I do have to ask, having now this experience in America, you told me how you had that little hiccup where everyone hugs in Brazil. You came to America, you hugged your manager. Has there been something from your culture growing up that you can't get rid of? It's something that's part of you that maybe you wish was an American culture?
Oh my gosh, there are many. Wow, okay. So also, I think this adaptability and this flexibility that I mentioned, like, okay, this is very much Brazilian culture. And in Brazil, so I think it's so funny. Okay, so there's I still struggle almost 10 years here. In Brazil, there is always a path to a yes. Always. In America, it's always no. It doesn't matter. Like, it is always a rule. Like, and I'm like, how is it possible? Like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, why are you saying no? Like, so it's a guidance, like, to restaurants, like, you have to be on time. And like, then if the table is for two, you can't put another chair, which I always think is important. There is a space for like another chair. The restaurants will make more money. But no, so this saying no because it's a rule, like, no, because this is something that I still struggle to this day. What I miss most culturally is, and even though I do this now, in Brazil, I just call my friends and my family, hey, let's have dinner tonight. This doesn't happen here. You have to book in advance. So I'm so American today. I was like trying to book like a brunch with like a Brazilian friends that lives here. super successful
Yeah.
woman too. And it took us 3 weeks, and we had to put in the calendar. If not, we couldn't do it. And like, this is so against our culture. And then I saw her, and I was like, yes, I think we are Americans now. We put in meetings on Google Calendar. So.
Oh my God. Camila, you're so funny. I don't even know if you're intending to be funny, but it's great.
I definitely did not. So yes.
No, but you're so right. It's so true. Even like a table, adding another chair. Like my parents are both South African, so I think I came with your mindset too. Like rules don't mean much. But I love that. I love that. And okay, Camila, I have one more question for you, which is a little bit different, but what craft are you spending a lifetime honing?
I am a very genuine person, and I speak my mind. And like, this has put me in trouble in many situations. So you think it's funny, but sometimes it's not funny when I say what's in my mind. And like, and everyone
Yeah.
like, Camila, why did you say this? So this is definitely something that I'm always trying to be more thoughtful. Like, maybe it's a culture thing, especially living like in a completely different cultural environment. But one thing that I'm very thoughtful is like, okay, how do I say things, and like, how do I craft my messaging, or like, how do I slow down to like speed up like later.
Yeah.
So those are things that I'm always trying
Ooh.
to improve on the messaging, or like when I'm speaking with folks.
Because it's also to different personas on your team. Like someone may do well with that type of feedback, but other one, it could be the same feedback, but it has to be packaged differently. Is that what you mean? Like almost being
No,
thoughtful?
no, no, no. There's a sorry. No, there's a
No, that's fine. Please.
I think it's this is actually fine. I do listen to people a lot. I think it's more like in general settings. Like, okay, I'll give you an example. So at Kraft Heinz,
Yeah.
our global CFO, whenever he wanted to know the truth, like, he would ask, okay, can you bring Camila here? Because if like I was not telling exactly the truth, you could see that I was getting reds, that I was not comfortable with that. So when I truly
Wow.
believe on something, I'm gonna be full power on. But if I don't believe in something, then you see on my face, I will sleep out that I don't like it. So it's very clear. So I don't think this is helpful always. I'm way too genuine.
Got it.
Yes, to a point that sometimes can even like be naive. So yeah.
I think because also
I think that's funny
it
again.
seems like
So see, it shouldn't be funny. It's a real thing.
no, because I think when it becomes a problem, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but when it becomes a problem is especially when you're on a team and maybe the ultimate decision is different than what you believe, but at the end of the day, you're part of this team. You have to disagree, but commit, and do your best work. I imagine that's where it can come up.
Yes, and I disagree and commit. I very much do, but you will see on my face that I'm disagreeing. Like, and I will try my best to commit, but it just doesn't
Yeah,
sound me.
right. Doesn't sound like you, and I have to change that. Wow. Well, Camila, this has been so much fun and just so informative. I've learned a ton. So thank you for coming on She Leads. I appreciate it.
Of course, thank you so much for having me here. I hope everyone have a
Of
lot of
course.
fun listening to this.